Force
Revolution.
Veganism, Ahimsa, and Krishna consciousness.
Hi, welcome to Soul Force Revolution. I want to talk about the connection between veganism, Ahimsa, and Krishna consciousness. So, as we see, the vegan movement spreading quite rapidly in the modern day, even though it started in the 40s. Donald Watson, of course, vegetarianism was around before that, but taken it to the next level, trying to eliminate animal suffering and human suffering. It's really grown in a massive way, exponentially, all around the world, in every country practically. I just want to talk about the origins of that. So when it was founded, shortly afterwards they connected it to the ancient Vedic culture, or Indian culture as people may seem to think it is, but a Vedic culture, a worldwide culture based on the Sanskrit teachings, loosely termed the Vedas. So the term Ahimsa means non-violence, Himsa means violence, and the A prefix means non-violence. And then they also have the term Nati Himsa, because complete non-violence is almost impossible. It's not really possible to completely eliminate all violence, because even just walking down the street, we're stepping on living beings, insects, even by breathing, eating, drinking. And all these living beings are considered in the Vedas to be equal, to be conscious spiritual beings inhabiting various different bodies with different levels of consciousness, even plants, so animals, humans, aquatics, mammals. Everything's basically the same spark of consciousness, but experiencing different levels of consciousness according to the body. So therefore there's no real justification for unnecessarily harming or killing any living entity. Because we do that accidentally, the term Nati Himsa, or reduced violence, is really the term and the aspiration we're trying to get to. Because if you say something's 100% cruelty free, can you really guarantee that? It's not really possible. There's so many products may have zero animal products in, or testing, or any animal use, but then the human beings which have produced those have often been exploited in, bad conditions, poor working conditions, not, remunerated properly. And of course humans are animals, mammals, so if you talk about animal rights, you cannot talk about animal rights without including humans. People sometimes think, oh, you guys, you're talking about animal rights, what about the humans? It's like, no, actually humans are all part of it. So beyond looking at animal rights or human rights is really the rights of all living beings. So there was a mantra in Sanskrit, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, which means may all beings be happy and free. And the implication in the mantra is that anything I'm doing is trying to contribute in some way to that goal of all beings being happy and free, obviously including ourselves and all other beings. So that's really Ahimsa in a nutshell, a Nati Himsa, like reduced violence. So it's a great thing that people are turning towards vegetarianism, veganism, environmental issues, all these other moral concerns to try and improve the world. But the shortcoming is often that we think that is the all in all. Now, the Vedas explain that this material reality we're in is subjected to 4 prison walls, which are birth, disease, old age, and death. Now, there's no escaping those 4 things in this material realm, because it's just the nature of it. You may try and change it. You may think, oh, science will change that one day. We'll, stop death. We'll find out, the cause of death, the cause of old age, and we'll stop that, put a halt to it, or all disease. So we may have cure for some diseases, but we don't have the cure for disease itself, or for birth, for rebirth. So it also explains that for one who's taken birth, sure to die, and one who dies is sure to take birth again, because the conscious being within the body is always changing the body. That's a scientific fact as well. Every 7 to 10 years, every single cell is replaced and changed. So therefore we're also transmigrating. We're moving through bodies even within this body. So sometimes people think, oh, well, reincarnation, that's it's not a fact, it's just a belief. But actually no, we're reincarnating every time, because carne means flesh, like chili con carne, which is a dish with flesh, with meat. So reincarnation means refleshing. So every time we're eating, we're actually refleshing ourselves. And if we don't eat and drink, then obviously we can't survive. So constantly the body's changing. We're losing cells at every moment. We're losing skin, we're losing hair as we're growing older. Everything is losing, and we have to keep replenishing. So we're actually transmigrating through body to body every moment. If we're 21 years old, we've had like 3 different bodies already every 7 years or so. And different parts of the body will replace quicker than others. Some are replaced sort of daily or weekly or yearly, and eventually the slow ones end up taking maybe 7 to 10 years. But eventually we're in a completely different body. We're not in the same body that we had when we were young. It's not just expanded from a baby's body, it's actually changed. Just like a movie is just a selection of still images. It's like 24 frames per second. But it's not one movie, it just appears to be one continuous movie. But anyone who knows video editing, is just simply frames, you're just talking about still images put together in an animation and with a soundtrack. We can't basically get rid of old age, disease, death, and then also rebirth according to the consciousness that we're in at the time of death. Only the physical gross body dies, but the subtle body, which we call the mind or the intelligence or the ego, within that subtle body doesn't die, and that carries on moving, and according to the desires that we have now, then we carry on and we get another body, just like we're getting different bodies already now. At the time of death, it's just like changing your clothes. Bhagavad-gita says that just as one gives up old clothes and puts new ones on, the soul simply takes on new mature bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So the ultimate goal is to try and get out of that. See, the shortcoming of anything else, anything on the material platform, you can't stop that death. You may delay it, you may improve the situation that the living being is in, the conditions that they're in, and save them from being harmed or from being slaughtered. But at the end of the day, we have to grow old and die anyway. So whether it's a natural death or an unnatural death, then death can't be prevented. And so it's a little bit like if you go to the beach and you see someone drowning and you run out and you rescue them, swim towards them, and then you come back to the shore just with their clothes and you say, I've saved them, save them. It would be ridiculous because the actual person's drowning, dying, but you've just rescued the dress. So the analogy is given in the Vedas that trying to rescue the gross material body, the outward dress of the living entity, is futile. In and of itself, you're not actually going to help the living entity, because the living entity is still drowning in the ocean of material existence. And the conscious living entity doesn't belong in the material existence, it's separate. Matter and consciousness are completely separate. And they've never been able to actually discover that consciousness comes from matter, even though scientists may make that claim. And they actually can't do it. They can't produce consciousness from matter because it's completely separate. So the living being that's constantly changing bodies is what we need to address, and that living being belongs in a non-material realm, a transcendental realm, a spiritual realm, an eternal realm, just the opposite of here. And in Sanskrit that's known as Satchidananda, which means eternal, full of knowledge and full bliss. So full consciousness. Whereas in the material world we have the opposite. We have Asat, which is temporary, Achit, full of ignorance, and Nirananda, full of miseries. The aforementioned miseries, birth, death, old age and disease, they just pertain to the body. But then there's threefold miseries. There's the miseries of the body and the mind, and then there's miseries coming from other living entities, and then there's miseries from natural disturbances such as the climate, the environment. And so these threefold miseries are constantly prodding us. It's like the prongs of a trident. Yeah, so we have to first we have to transcend those miseries by being in a spiritual consciousness, not identifying with the material body and mind. And then when that spiritual consciousness is perfected, then we're eligible not to take on another material body. Otherwise the desires that we have to take on another body, and again we continue the cycle. So we may enjoy eating a lot, but the material body, the human form of life, you can't really eat that much compared to some animals, like an elephant, or large animals can eat, and some animals are just eating all day, whereas human beings not very good at eating a lot. So if we really want to eat, then we can get a body where we can fulfill that desire, but then we take on the material body, and we perpetuate the cycle. And there's 8.4 million species of life that we go through to try and enjoy the different pleasures of the material body. So if we want to eat a lot, then we get a good body for eating. If we want to sleep a lot, then we can get a body of a bear. Koala bears in Australia, they sleep for 23 hours of the day or more, and then they simply get up, eat some leaves, and pretty much go back to sleep. So human life's not meant for a huge amount of eating or sleeping or mating. Some animals are just mating like 50, 60 times a day. And then the other thing is defending or fearing. So there's constant fear, especially in the animal kingdom. Birds are always looking like, he wants to eat, it's like, oh, left, right, anyone, oh, quick, channel's going, and then they have to quickly go, because it's a great concern that, they're going to be preyed upon by a larger animal. So every animal is subject to being the food for another animal. So that's also true of human beings. So we also have our food, and if we're eating plants, then we're still taking a life, but it's obviously a lot better than taking the life of an animal or human being. It's just in different gradations, but still it's a kind of a life. But because that's been sort of ordained as food, and we have to eat something organic, then we minimize the suffering. But you can't completely eliminate it completely, we just only reduce it. Krishna consciousness means to understand the source of our existence, the source of consciousness, the supreme living entity, Krishna, or the all-attractive, who is like the whole and we're like the part, like the sparks of the fire. And reconnecting with that source is the only real way to end all the suffering, eliminate all the suffering. So it's great that people are becoming more conscious, more aware, but these are just sort of steps towards the ultimate goal. But if we don't reach the ultimate goal, it's a bit like doing a dot to dot. You've got like join the dots 1 to 100, and you join the dots and you get to say 25. You think, yes, great, I've done it, I've finished. But no, you've got to keep going, like, so, join the dots to like 25 might be like, becoming a vegetarian, then you go a bit further, and you become vegan. You try and, eliminate buying things which are unenvironmentally friendly, or exploiting other human beings, sweatshop materials, and so we try and reduce consumer goods, things like that. And it's just one step after another, dot to dot. But eventually we need to come to the point where we understand we're not this material body, we're a spiritual living entity. All the living entities are spiritual by nature and need to be in a realm where that full consciousness and full bliss can flourish. And so that becomes the ultimate welfare work, it becomes the ultimate compassion for the actual living entity, to take them right out of the material cycle of samsara, or birth and death. So yeah, it's wonderful people are waking up, but we need to continue waking up. We need to never stop learning, never stop questioning, never stop growing and learning from mistakes and moving forward. And so eventually we can have a much more conscious society, because right at this moment we've got a very unconscious society. For the most part, we're really pushed to just work, buy, consume and die. Whereas the Vedas really teach that economic development is just a part of life that we have to go through just to maintain the material body. But then we need to actually get beyond just economic development and then a certain amount of sense gratification. We need to understand who we are, self-realization, and then eventually get to the goal of being perfect in that realization of our identity, our spiritual eternal identity, and then go back, just like waking up. If you've got a dream and dreaming of tigers coming to chase you, so you think, well, the solution is, okay, right, let's run away in the dream, or let's get a sword or get a gun and fight the tiger. But no, that's not the solution. The solution is simply wake up from the dream and realize that it's a dream. So material life is like that. We try and do so many things. We've got so much ways of defending and trying to make ourselves secure, and, you know, billions of dollars spent on defense, but ultimately it's a dream, and we have to wake up from. Otherwise, like, we'll just continue to try and make solutions in the material world, which is just simply like a nightmare of just problems one after another, especially in this age which is named Kali Yuga, or the age of quarrel, and we see that constantly. It's just a constant battle to survive, and you know, the people at the top of the power pyramid are so-called enjoying the spoils of everyone else, and everyone else is just like fighting for the crumbs that fall off the table, but no one's really free from the suffering. Even the people at the top we shouldn't envy, because their lives are so full of anxiety, and they're not actually satisfied and happy internally, and they end up more miserable just chasing the, you know, ephemeral pleasures of the material world and trying to gain power and control. So ultimately those people are the most lost. You know, we should have the most compassion for the people who are actually the most lost, and the most wealthy people are often suffering a great deal. It's not just that the beggar in the street is suffering, but actually we should have great compassion for, you know, the businessman who's just completely locked in a cycle with no higher consciousness, no real purpose to life, and therefore, you know, people become so frustrated, and often, you know, so many people will take their lives. So the best way to actually attain this spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness is the chanting the Maha Mantra. Because mantra meditation means that which frees the mind, the sound which frees the mind, that completely transcends material consciousness, brings us into spiritual consciousness, and then we actually realise that when we're in spiritual consciousness, then we're no longer in a so-called material world, because it depends on our perception, our consciousness, not so much the physical location where we are. So this Maha Mantra, or Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. When that's repeated, that transcendental vibration automatically wakes us up from the dream of material existence. So the spreading of that will also help to wake up all of the living entities and become actually the greatest welfare work that we can perform on this earth.